DM forces my fetish on my group. Firstly, I would like to say I'm using a throwaway for a reason. Specifically, my abhorrent sexual fetishes, which I admit to in this story. I should start by confessing something. I have an incest fetish. I cannot explain why, but I find incest really hot. And that, unfortunately, is the crux of this story. I admit it's mostly my fault, but it was still uncomfortable for me as well as for my other players. The characters in this story are me, playing a human bard, DM, our group's DM. She's actually a really good DM in spite of what you may think of her, based on this story. But she is the antagonist of the story, unfortunately. Fighter, a very good friend of mine playing a half-elf fighter. Rogue, a former friend who played a human rogue. Wizard, another former friend who played a halfling wizard. Now, with the introductions out of the way, our story begins with a group of friends who started our group in college. For 3 years, we had an amazing game, which I could tell many much more positive stories about and still have many good memories of. Unfortunately, it wasn't going to last. One night after a game, a few of us went to the bar and I had a bit too much to drink. DM ended up driving me home, and during the car ride, my autistic ass confessed my incest fetish to her. This was something I'd never have done while sober, and was a massive mistake on my part, but at the time I thought she reacted relatively positively. If only I knew how wrong I was. The next 2 sessions passed without issue, but I learned that there were issues back in my character's home village, and our party decided to investigate. By the time we arrived back at my character's hometown, I'd honestly forgotten about my drunken confession to DM. Unfortunately, she hadn't. When we arrived at my character's hometown, we learned that a large portion of the village, including my character's father, had been kidnapped by a roving band of orcs. We, being a mostly good party, including my bard, who is very, very lawful good, immediately decided that we would rescue the hostages. At this point, we retreated to our first mildly weird moment, namely my bard's mother being given a special scene where she holds him in really close and talks about how much of a man her brave little boy has grown into. At the time, it was pretty innocuous, but in hindsight, DM put a disturbing amount of detail into it, especially how large her bosom was and how tightly she pressed against my character while hugging him. After this moment, we went to fight the orcs. It was a very difficult combat, but we enjoyed it a lot, and the boss fight with the orc chieftain was honestly incredible. Sadly, it was overshadowed by what came afterwards. When we went to rescue the prisoners, we had discovered that all of the men among the prisoners had been surgically castrated by the orcs. This already made all of us except the DM really, really uncomfortable, but only Rogue really spoke up about it at the time. In addition, when I asked about my character's father, we had learned that he had been sacrificed to the orcs' dark gods. DM explicitly stated that this was after he had been castrated with the rest of the men. My character actually had a nice RP moment when our party found his father's corpse. He was utterly devastated. This had been the man who had taught him to approach the world with a smile on his face and a song on his lips, and he was gone. Not only was he gone, but he had been utterly humiliated, spit on, and stripped of dignity before his death. My character insisted on taking his corpse to town where he could be given a proper burial, and for some reason the DM seemed almost annoyed by this. After we got to town, DM described to us how distraught the village women were to hear of their husbands, sons, and brothers' conditions. This was to be expected, but when she got to my character's mother's reaction to seeing her son exhaustedly carrying her husband's corpse into town, something changed, and it was noticeable to everyone at the table. She seemed to put more detail into her appearance than her emotions. I feel like it would be in very bad taste to mention specifics, but the phrase heaving bosom was uttered several times, as DM described my character's mother in her state of mourning over the man she married. It was honestly kind of disgusting, and I could tell the other players noticed as well, though none of us said anything. The townsfolk held a celebration for us after our defeat of the orcs, but I made it very clear that my character wasn't really in a celebrating mood. He was drunk, but more to forget the horrific things that had happened to his father than out of any sort of merriment. Then DM made her move. She described my bard's mother walking in on my character, half drunk and sullen, in the tavern, while everyone else was outside enjoying the festivities. DM made it clear she meant everyone, including the tavern keeper. We were alone together. Then she told me how, while my character's mother was devastated by the loss of my character's father, she had been missing a man in her life, even before the orcs had kidnapped him. I probably should have objected at this point, but I honestly didn't know what to do. Then DM described my character's mother offering to soothe the pain for both of us and taking off her clothes. While we'd already established that all of us were okay with NSFW themes in the campaign, this was a bit much, and Fighter explicitly said he was not okay with what was going on currently. Wizard and Rogue immediately said so as well, and I finally got up the guts to speak up myself. At this point, DM kind of freaked out a bit. Not by a lot. She didn't start screaming or burst into tears, but she got noticeably upset. She told us that the entire village subplot had been arranged because of me, and the incest thing had happened because I had told her I had an incest fetish on the way home from the bar several weeks ago. I honestly don't remember much of what happened next. It was a screaming match, and being a naturally timid person, I hate screaming matches. What's worse, a large portion of the screaming from everyone else, and I do mean everyone, was directed at me. I can't say it wasn't deserved, because this was my fault, but I was still really upset about it. In the aftermath, our group disbanded. Wizard will no longer talk to me at all, and Rogue says our friendship is over. Thankfully, Fighter is still friends with me. It's been 5 days and I still haven't talked to DM. Fighter claims she had a crush on me, which I'm not sure if I believe, but would explain a lot of her actions. I'm not really sure what to do, honestly. I know this is all my fault, but I'm not sure how to make amends. This has caused a huge fracture at our table, and even if we do somehow end up bringing it back together, I don't think things will ever be the same. I'd honestly really appreciate some advice, though I know this isn't the purpose of the sub. Edit 1. Okay, this blew up a lot more than I expected it to, and while I wish I could respond to all or at least most of the comments, that would simply take too much time. I am genuinely incredibly grateful for all the love, support, and advice I'm getting in the comments. A lot of people seem to think that the reason Rogue and Wizard are mad at me is because they think I arranged this with DM. I haven't asked them, but I find this very likely. I'll talk to Rogue about this, as we're still on speaking terms despite no longer being friends, and we'll also try to speak to Wizard. Also, while a lot of you are suggesting I talk to this with DM, and that is a good idea, I really do not want to talk to her right now. A few people, trolls I assume, are suggesting I hook up with her, which no thank you. Maybe I'd have considered it before the events of this story, but after such a severe betrayal of my trust and confidentiality, I want nothing to do with her, and would want nothing to do with her romantically even if we somehow managed to patch up our friendship. User Ariana Spinner really summed up what I was thinking perfectly. I don't understand the reactions. Why are they mad at you and not the GM? Did you accept full blame for this or something? If someone had used my fetish at the table, I would be furious at that person, and it would be very clear to the whole table a trust had been violated. I mean, yes, creepy fantasies would drive people away from you, I get that, but I would think they would be just as upset at her, if not more so, because she forced them to witness it. The amount of projection and pure unadulterated creepiness pouring out of this DM is overwhelming. Tell us about your creepy and bad DM experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, All Things D&D. Stay tuned for more amazing Dungeons & Dragons content.